Hey, Bishop Kurt.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever. You know, we were talking a couple months on the phone, and I started telling you your life story, and you're like, nope, that's wrong. And I said, oh, and I said something else. You said, nope, that's wrong. Do you remember that?
No.
I got everything wrong about your life. And so what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about your life, maybe convey a little bit about what it means to be Byzantine Catholic in Texas, growing up, you know, in the West, kind of imparting what this experience was like. So I'm just going to ask a whole bunch of questions and you can give some reflection, okay? So where were you born?
I was born on a Royal Air Force base in Norfolk County, England.
No kidding. What did your dad do?
He was in the U.S. Air Force defending England from the Koreans.
Oh, the Korean War.
Yeah.
What about your mom?
They were both geologists, but then she was a housewife after they got married. Wanted to raise the family and not work.
Your dad was a geologist for the Air Force?
No, he was a meteorologist for the Air Force.
Oh, cool.
But then he was a geologist in the petroleum business.
Which company did he work for?
Tenneco.
Tenneco. And they were down in Texas?
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. So you were born in England, and then how did you get to Texas?
My mother says something like we had 13 moves, or I'm sure I'm exaggerating, but between the military and the oil business, they moved a lot. But then when we got to Corpus Christi, we stayed for 13 years. And then they stayed in Houston for a very long time.
So your childhood was mostly Corpus Christi and Houston, right?
That's right.
Brothers and sisters?
Yeah, there are 2 boys and 2 girls in the family. I'm second.
You're second. You're second. Where are they at now?
They're all in Texas.
Yeah. What are they doing?
Well, I always said my older sister would be president of her own oil company someday. And so it's not an oil drilling company, but it is kind of, it's in that business. She did, in fact, be president of her own company.
Yeah.
And my other sister takes care of my mother. And my brother's, he doesn't have to work anymore. He's retired.
Is your mom still in Houston or where?
No,
is she?
she's in Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi. I've never been to Corpus Christi. You like it there?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. How often do you get home?
Twice a year.
Nice, 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 nice.
She's 95 now.
Nice. So, what was your home parish?
In Corpus Christi, we had one. We moved to Houston when I was finished junior high, and we kind of moved around. But you know, we found this biritual chapel, or a chapel run by a biritual with the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and it was you know, like, you know how it is. It's like, are you sure we can go here? Are you sure they're Catholic? But the music was a big thing at that little chapel, and we liked music, and we just kept going. And then some of the parishioners said, you know, we have a Ukrainian parish. You should try that out. So we went to the Ukrainian parish, and my mother and I both learned the Cyrillic alphabet so we could sing in the choir there. And then after I left Houston, about that time, some of the parishioners said, you know, we're Ruthenians, we're going to start a parish, and you want to help? So my parents said, okay. So they were founders of the Ruthenian parish in Houston, Texas, even though I don't have a drop of Slavic blood in me.
No. There's more and more people who have absolutely no Slavic blood in our church. I don't think it's a requirement.
And one of my know-it-all classmates in seminary said, you know you'll never be a bishop, don't you, because you're not Slavic. And I believed him. It made perfect sense to me.
Oh, I bet that was a shock when you got the phone call.
I had to sit down. Yeah, I kind of was losing consciousness.
So what did you do after you went to high school, right? Where did you go to college?
I went to a place in Houston called Rice.
Bryce. What kind of college was it? It's small, big, you know?
It's a small liberal arts school, although it was best known then for science and engineering.
Nice. And your degree is in?
Electrical engineering and mathematics.
What did you do after college?
Well, I went to grad school. I thought I was going to be a professor, so I went to Salt Lake City to study mathematics at University of Utah.
Ah, so you know the Mormons then, too.
I do know the Mormons, yeah.
Yeah. What's Catholic like in the Mormon territories?
I heard Well, I was at the university, which is a different culture, but I remember a priest calling it the siege mentality there, that
What do you mean?
you felt like you were under siege all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you guys get through it?
Like I said, at the university it was different, but it is. I was just telling someone in New Jersey, you find out what it's like to be a minority when you live there. People let you know in all kinds of ways that you're not one of them and that you don't fit in. And it's little subtle things all the time.
How does that translate into, for us as a church, feeling like a siege mentality or that constant reminder you don't belong?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say I have a siege mentality, but I think probably and one of our priests on the West Coast, Edmund Adrani, said years ago, he said, we need to stop being so defensive.
How do we do that?
Which one are you making? How do we be defensive, or how do we stop doing it?
How do we stop being defensive?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be proud of who you are. I was just giving a short little talk at the altar servers camp. Both of my parents are converts to the Catholic Church. My mother wanted to become Catholic when she was 14. My father became Catholic when I was 14. And so, basically, I'm what they call a WASP in the United States. And as I was growing up, one of the things as I got out of Catholic elementary school and was out in the world, something that always puzzled me was why Catholics were so apologetic about their religion. I mean, I didn't feel that way because I didn't grow up in a Catholic culture and a Catholic family, But I would just hear this constantly. People would start saying, "What church do you go to?" And Catholics would always look sheepish and say, "Well, I'm Catholic, but I'm not a very good one." And they always even their body language was very apologetic, and it was very puzzling to me. And and I guess I've learned a lot, especially going to the East Coast, that an awful lot of Catholics are immigrants, and so they wanted to fit in. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're apologizing and being defensive. And actually, to tell you a little bit more, I gave this talk to these altar boys. I said, be proud of who you are. If you're proud of who you are, other people will respect you, no matter what you are. If you're proud of it, other people will respect you. If you're embarrassed about who you are, other people will treat you that way. And one of the new priests from Ukraine said after my rather passionate talk to these altar boys, he came up and he said, Bishop, I've been worried, are we going to have a church in the United States or not? And he said, after your talk, I believe we are going to have a church.
I can relate to that because up in Minnesota, St. John's is formed from the people who didn't follow Toth. And once Father Toth, had left St. Mary's, the Russian Tsar funded the building of a new church there. And of course, it's a Tsarist church. And because they didn't have to deal with a lot of the stuff that we had to deal with, they were able to grow really big and really quick and fast and move on. And so they're the main church in town. And then 4 blocks away is St. John's. And like the rest of our churches, in those early days, we struggled a lot. And when I got there was a lot of people who were just always apologizing because they weren't St. Mary's. St. Mary's was the real Eastern church, and we were just the leftovers. And it's a hard mentality to break. It's like, no, we actually have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Nothing. And so I understand what you're saying there. I get it.
If I could add one thing to it, maybe I'm being defensive here, but when I said like I'm from the WASP culture, it didn't mean that I think I'm better than other people, but just the opposite. My heritage was that we're all just as good as each other. Yeah. That's we were in the Revolution. We wrote the Bill of Rights because we think everybody has the same rights. Not that there's nobody that's better than anybody else. So that's why it was hard for me to understand this mentality where people feel like they don't fit in the rest of society somehow. That's why we fought the Civil War. That's why we fought the Revolution, so that we can all treat each other the same.
Yeah, my mom's side of the family goes back too, because we go all the way back to Jamestown. So, I mean, we fought in the Revolutionary War and, in the Civil War and all that stuff. And I feel the same way. I'm like, this is why we fought and died, so that everybody could get a chance. That's the point, And I'm very proud of the people who fought those wars in my family. And I've got like 10 or 12 people in the parish who can trace their families back to the colonies. And I said, oh, we have to have a Byzantine Catholic, sons and daughters of the Revolutionary chapter now, because we can honestly say that Byzantine Catholics, like we've got ancestors who fought in the Revolution. So I think that's kind of funny that, I guess that's part of the change. It's amazing. It's amazing.
If I could just share a little trivia, which is off topic, but this is something most people don't know. Am I going in and out here or what?
Yeah,
but just something I learned when I was on Kodiak Island is, when we bought Alaska from Russia, it was heavily evangelized already by the Russian Orthodox. The Tsar believed that we would not take care of those people here. And he left all that money in the U.S. to take care of Russian Orthodox in the U.S. So that's where that money came from, that they left it here to take care of their people.
Yeah. Yeah, I always said there's a book waiting for Minneapolis because the Tsar was taking care of St. Mary's, and Franz Joseph was working to establish St. John's.
Oh.
And so, within 5 blocks in Minneapolis, you had 2 emperors deciding what was going to happen with the Slavs. And, and that's the reality that we live in, And so these days, the people of St. Mary's, we're all good friends, and we're all interrelated with each other, and we help each other out. So all those, Alexis Toth, nobody's throwing rocks at each other anymore, and nobody's, we're all friends now. But yeah, within 5 blocks, we had 2 czars and a pope deciding what was going to happen. And that's my neighborhood that I take my walk in. So, and there's remnants of it everywhere. Is one of the more interesting things, this is really off topic, is I've been through the metricals over at St. Mary's, and I can recognize Father Alexis Toth's handwriting. I know when he wrote and what he didn't write, because his handwriting, he had very beautiful handwriting. His education was off the charts, and he had this very beautiful script. And in the metricals, you can see Greek Catholic, Greek Catholic, Greek Catholic, and then Pravoslavny, and you can see the actual date when he started baptizing people Orthodox and stopped Catholic. It's right there. It's all there still. So I think it's kind of an amazing thing. That's way off topic. Let's get back to you.
I hope I'm not the topic here today. I hope Jesus Christ is the topic.
Jesus Christ is the topic, and how he's working in your life, right? So when did you go to seminary?
1984.
How old were you?
I was 29.
29.
Turned 30 right after I got there.
Yeah. Cyril Methodius.
Yes.
Cyril Methodius, yeah.
I'm a product of our fine seminary in Pittsburgh.
Who was your rector?
Ray Balta was the rector the whole time I was there.
Okay, good. Then what happened?
If we didn't learn anything else, we learned about cigars. I guess you heard he died at a cigar bar watching a Steelers game, which is our other religion.
Yeah. Well, then God was good to him, huh? Yeah. So what happened to you after seminary?
I do want to say, this isn't off topic, but I'm uncomfortable about this interview because a friend told me once, he was at an event with Mother Teresa, and he left something in the sacristy, and he went back there to get his whatever it was, and Mother Teresa was in there dressing down an archbishop, and she was saying to him, "Archbishop, the people don't want to hear about you, they want to hear about Jesus. you don't talk about yourself, you talk about Jesus. And so when I teach preaching, I tell people that. Keep that in mind for the rest of your life. People don't want to hear about you, they want to hear about Jesus. So
That's
anyway,
true. That's true.
insofar as I hope I'm following my call from Jesus, I'll try to answer your questions.
So, I think if we're telling our life story right, we are telling the story of Jesus.
Okay.
Because, as baptized Christians and disciples, where we're born and where we've been is the story of Jesus, right? There's the old, story from Plato, Phaedrus. And Socrates meets Phaedrus and on the way from the theater, and he says, "Oh, Phaedrus, where are you going?" And he says, "How do I know where I'm going unless I know where I've been?" And so if we're journeying to Christ, we should be able to reflect on our lives and say, where was God in all this? So, the point of the interviews is help us. Show us where God has been in Texas, where God has been in Burnette, so that we can see it in ourselves, so we could pull it out of our parishioners, And then there's so many people here who don't know us. And it's important to tell the story so we know where we're going.
Okay, so to answer your question, after seminary, my first assignment was Fontana, California. It was at that time one of the most undesirable places in California. I think basically because the Santa Ana winds are so strong there. They have airborne rocks
What?
when the Santa Ana winds are going. And so the real estate developers had developed all the way out to the mountain range and skipped Fontana. They just noticed they'd missed it right about when I moved there. Hell's Angels was founded there. The Ku Klux Klan was centered there till the FBI shut it down. The steel mill was there, which is why we have a church there. And we even had a bad reputation in prison. One of my parishioners who was a jailbird told me that we'd have, and I thought, wow, that's something to say. We even have a bad reputation in prison. But getting back to Jesus, I often do tell people in my sermons that the remarkable thing was in that, what my cousin called this great spiritual darkness, everybody there knew what a Catholic priest was. They weren't Catholic, but even the bikers would say, "Hello, Father," if I had my collar on. And you drive just a short distance from there in Southern California to these suburbs where everything is beautiful. The plants are beautiful, the landscaping is beautiful, the people are beautiful, their children are beautiful, and they have no use for a priest because, well, they see you as another professional and one that they don't happen to need today. They don't need a priest, they need a dentist or something, but they have no sense whatsoever of something sacred. And but in this very spiritually dark area, everybody knew what a priest was, and they respected what's holy. And I often think of that in the life of Jesus, how it seems like when he was up there in pagan territory, land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, Galilee of the Gentiles, Galilee of the pagans, he's much more successful up there. And the closer he got to the holy city of Jerusalem, the more opposition he found. So I'm sure, when I've talked about this, most priests will say to me they've had the same experience, that when you're in the rough area, people respect a priest. And the more you get into well-educated, rich people, the less they need a priest.
It's probably true. So how long were you in the Santa Ana winds with airborne rocks?
I was in Fontana for 9 years. I thought I was going to be there the rest of my life because I've never asked to leave a parish. I never asked for a parish. I never asked to leave. I just did what I was assigned. And I thought nobody would ever ask for the Fontana parish, so I thought I would be there the rest of my life. Bishop Kuzma said to me once, "Kurt, love your people." I thought that was about as abstract, as useless an idea as I ever heard. And yet, it's true. I mean, you have to fall in love with your people. If they aren't perfect, well, no family's perfect, but especially over time, you come to see the good in everybody, and they come to respect you and see you as their spiritual father. So, I was in love with the people of Fontana by the time I left.
Oh, sure.
Not the city, but but my parishioners anyway.
How big was the parish?
It seated about 100. I would say when I came there, we would have 40 people regularly and 60 people on a big day. When I left, we had 80 people every Sunday and 100 on a big day. So,
Nice.
so it filled up.
So they knew you loved them.
They say, these studies show a church in the U.S. will fill up to 80% of its capacity. Then Americans, I guess, feel uncomfortable being more crowded than that. So it filled up to 80%. We had a huge catechism program. A couple Franciscans ran it. It was very popular in the neighborhood. All these Mexicans dropped their kids off for catechism. They didn't go to our church, but that was fine with me. I thought, that's better than nothing. Some of them did join our church, but these cars were pulling in after liturgy to drop their kids off for the catechism program.
Nice. So then where did you go after that?
I was sent to Portland, Oregon,
Yeah.
where I had a house in I don't know if you'd call it a bad neighborhood. It was like a little bit of Appalachia in a city. There were no gutters, just grass ditches. And one of the first guys I met, what was his name? I can't remember his name now. But he introduced himself, very friendly. He said, I was born in that house, my father was born in that house, and my grandfather was born in that house. So I think they came over in the wagon trains in the 1830s. It turned out he lived in a truck, though. I mentioned once, he lives in that house, and his uncle said, no, he lives in that truck there. Lee, that was his name.
Lee.
So I was jogging once, and I had a T-shirt on with an icon of Christ on it, and he liked the T-shirt a lot, so I washed it and gave it to him. And then I asked about him a little while later, and I guess he OD'd, so he was dead. But every time I saw him, he showed me he had the shirt on underneath his flannel shirt. So I was real happy that he died with that T-shirt on.
That's awesome. That's really an awesome story. So,
but yeah, we had a little house, and we had liturgy in my garage. So within a year, we were buying a church that the Romans were shutting down. And it was the largest, I think it's still the largest church actually in the eparchy of Phoenix physically. And at the age of 42, I was the oldest man in the parish, and we had twice as many children as adults. So this place just really boomed. And then the priest came up for a retreat, I think the same year that Archbishop became our new bishop. The retreat before was 9/11. We were all in New Mexico when they blew up New York. And Steve Washko said, we need to give Kurt some support. We're going up to Portland next year. So anyway, so the priest retreat was there, and Monsignor Michael Moran, that many of you know, he said, everybody looked around. They said, where did this come from, And Michael Moran said to me, Kurt, you're experiencing the fruits of obedience, because I obeyed the bishop and went there. And I don't have nearly the talents or administrative ability that many of you have, or the personality, because I'm sure you're all agreeing with that. But somehow, this amazing parish just sprung up out of nowhere. And anyway, so Monsignor Moran said, Kurt, that's because you obeyed the bishop.
So then what?
Well, then Archbishop sent me to Rome to study canon law, with a commitment that I would get to go back to my wonderful parish in Portland. But as I kept telling the people, bishops change, we can't trust anything. And I didn't say we can't trust anyone. It's a big difference. But no one knows the future. And sure enough, we got a new bishop. And he said, you're going to Albuquerque.
Who was making up that parish? Who are the parishioners? Where did they come from?
In Portland?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, we when we went to the Archbishop of Portland to ask him if we could buy his parish, I did a census to take to him, and it was 80% Eastern. Yeah. Most parishes on the West Coast are 50% Eastern or less. I'm talking, cradle, you know what I mean. Anyway, but that one was actually 80% Eastern, and the Ruthenians outnumbered the Ukrainians a little bit in the parish. There's an enormous Ukrainian population in Portland. Most of them are Pentecostal. I learned there that in the 80s, under the Reagan administration, you could get out of the Soviet Union if you said you were Pentecostal. And the Pentecostals, God bless them, were doing what Christians should have been doing in every church. They would bring a family over, take care of them, and say, now you have to take care of another family. So I couldn't fault them for taking Ukrainians into the Pentecostal church. They were doing what we should have been doing. But anyway, so there was this huge Ukrainian population in Portland. But some of them, though, were still Greek Catholic. They used to drive 2 hours to Eugene to go to church until we had our church there.
I was always kind of wondered about that because the early books at St. John's, the priests there would take the Empire Builder, the train, and they would do stational liturgies all through North Dakota and Wyoming, and they would end in Walla Walla, Washington. Mm-hmm. And in the metrics, you can see, a priest stopping and doing 5 baptisms, 2 weddings, 3 panahitas, and then, 2 days later, and it goes all the way up. And St. John's Books has got baptisms in Washington and down at Fort Collins, because they would go down south. And so that's over 1,000 miles that the priests at St. John's were taking care of communities in the whole West. And now they're all gone, of course, except for some of the Ukrainians, and some of them became Orthodox. And when you go through North Dakota and Montana, you can go in places and find little 3-bar crosses in the cemetery. And that's where we all had communities. But St. John's is very much related to all those communities up there in Seattle and Oregon.
I've been told the oldest Eastern parish there in Seattle was our church. But then the bishop wouldn't send a priest to Seattle, and so it became Orthodox.
It's possible, yeah. Yeah, it's very possible. That's how it happened. So I bet you we got some of those names at St. John's. What's going on there. Yeah. So then what? Then you got the call.
It's true. I got the call. 6:30 in the morning, Archbishop Skurla called and said, would you be willing to be rector of the seminary? And I have to tell you, if there's ever a parish where you would fall in love and never want a divorce, it's Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. It was really difficult to leave Albuquerque. And I told him, well, it's up to my bishop. I go wherever he tells me. So Bishop Jerry agreed to send me to Pittsburgh. And just a little humor on the side, but maybe it was some health problems there going on. I don't want to talk about individuals, but anyway. So it wasn't announced for a month, and so I told Bishop Jerry I was the rector in pectore. I think I just said that off the cuff once, but he thought that was so funny. He kept laughing about it. So I was the rector in pectore for a month or so.
Good, great.
And then I went to Pittsburgh in October, and then I moved to Passaic the next October.
Nice. And how long were you rector?
1 year.
1 year. Then what happened?
Archbishop Vigano called and said, somebody in the room knows about this, but I was standing out in the parking lot with Father O'Loughlin, and I got this text, right, that said the Vatican Embassy called, and I said an expletive, which I don't, which I very seldom did back then. Now in New Jersey, I'm getting corrupted, but anyway. But I thought it was for some investigation or something. It never in a million years crossed my mind. For one thing, Passaic was empty, but Passaic wasn't even in my consciousness, being a Western boy. And so anyway, so I called and they put the nuncio on, and I made the mistake of speaking Italian to him. And so he told me what was going on in Italian, and I thought I understood him. But I thought, I better be sure. I'm going to look pretty stupid if I go around telling people I'm the new bishop of Passaic and I made a mistake, you know. So I said, you have to tell me in English. He said, why? Your Italian's excellent. I said, no, you have to tell me in English. So okay, he said. So he told me in English. And I had to sit down, actually. I'm a fainter, and I was getting lightheaded. So I said, well, I have to talk to my spiritual director. Why? The Pope has chosen you. Do you say yes? I said, no, I really have to talk to my spiritual director. Why? The Pope has chosen you. Do you say yes? So finally he gave up, and so I called my spiritual director in Portland, and it's a kind of a miracle that he answered the phone and was alone at the time, because it was he had retired. He was archivist at University of Portland. So he anyway, he told me to say yes. So then I called the nuncio back, and that's my
That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
Yeah. Somebody was just telling me, though, our present nuncio is so sick of hearing stories about how priests got the phone call. You know, I mean, these come up a lot of times when they get a new bishop or something. They get up and tell this story, you know, and his assistant was telling me the nuncio is so sick of hearing those stories. He has trouble sitting still when they're telling another one.
That's good. That's good.
I think Bishop Archer might tell you his story. He was on a bike ride, right? That's one of the better stories.
Yeah, well, we'll get to him. Don't worry, you know. I think it's great. I think it's great. I always ask one question. You know, we can wrap this up.
Every time you interview a bishop, you ask?
Actually, everybody. What's the one thing that we're not talking about as a church that we should be talking about?
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I mean, you know, the things that we should be doing, we're talking about them. We may not be doing them, but, you know, we are talking about them. The fact that we need to welcome everybody into our church. I think even on the East Coast, all of our churches now are welcoming, because they realize they're just basically a funeral home if they don't welcome new people. And eventually, you know, when somebody young shows up, you know, people love young people. Yeah. So we're talking about that, but I can't think of something that we're not talking about, really.
Well, that's something to talk about. Are we welcoming, you know, and what are we doing about it?
Right.
You know?
When I was trying to think ahead about what I would say, I was thinking one of my first experiences after being told by Bishop Dolan I was going to be a priest. He didn't really ask, you know. He just gave you orders. My first summer in Van Nuys there, when Monsignor Moran was the pastor, and this man on the front porch said, I don't remember how he worded, but he said, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm American." And he said, "Well, good for you." That was a weird thing to say. You know, and then after I'd spent more time in the eastern United States, I realized how a lot of people, they're divided up into all these groups. And we didn't have that where I grew up in South Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's very important. It's important. So I guess we can open up to some questions. Does anybody have any questions for Bishop Kurt? Nobody wants to ask you anything.
Deacon wanted to ask a question to every speaker.
There you go, Deacon.
Well, nobody else
or
is
just
speaking.
Holler it out, probably.
I thought I'll break the ice. I'm a curious guy, I guess. We don't talk much about charisms, and I'm not looking for a theological answer, but what do you think your charisms are that you've been given by the Holy Spirit, and how have you developed them?
Okay. That's an interesting question. When you first started, you said we don't talk about charisms. what went through my head was how important that idea is. That was one of St. Paul's ideas, I think, about how we could get along together and form one body and one community, is to see that everybody has different gifts and charisms. But as one of the speakers was talking about the problem with clericalism, which it isn't, it's not necessarily us priests who have the clericalism, it's pervasive in our Catholic culture that, you know, the people do expect us to do everything. And cultivating that sense that they should all be contributing in different ways, I think it's a valuable idea that's very much evangelical and from the scriptures. In my case, I think it's kind of funny. One of my gifts is teaching, and I never imagined that would be the case. When I went to grad school, we were required to teach. We were at my program, we were never anybody's assistant. They handed you a college textbook and told you where to show up, and you walked in and there were a bunch of strange young people, strangers, you know. It was Utah, so they actually were not very strange. They were about as vanilla as you could get. But anyway, you know, expecting something from me, and I just discovered that I was good at it. But you know, I'm not a natural born public speaker. I hate being in front of other people, have people look at me. They say it's the number one fear, right? Ahead of death even, right? Of public speaking. I used to have a nightmare every quarter, a week or two before class, where I showed up in some embarrassing situation, and I was too ashamed to tell anyone the dreams. Then I found out lots of people have those same dreams. So, but you know, so it was a big shock to me to find out that I'm a good teacher.
I've heard your homilies, and they are great. I learned something.
Thank you.
I have a question. You had this unique privilege of administrating 3/4 of North America for a good long while. And I don't know, what did that teach you about our church? What did that teach you about your vocation as a priest, as a bishop? Give you hope, dreams, desires? Maybe even speak a little bit about Canada, since we have some representation in there.
I learned a lot of wonderful things. I don't know that I learned anything about myself, which is what you asked, but I learned what a wonderful eparchy Parma is. And you guys heard me, all the Parma guys heard me give this speech before, but for me it was like terra incognito, you know. Parma did not have anyone at seminary when I was in seminary. And all the names were mysterious names from another century. And when I came here and found this incredibly vibrant eparchy, I was just, I mean, that's the one thing when you say, I didn't learn about myself, but I did learn I should be doing things differently in Passaic, you know. Here are some of the things we should be doing, because this eparchy of Parma is just so vibrant, and it has a personality, you know, it has its own character. You know, Rome said, what do you think we should do? And after I came here, I said, Parma's a wonderful eparchy, and Phoenix is a wonderful eparchy. And they both have their own culture and their own life and soul. And so I think we should leave them the way they are. So I learned some really wonderful things about Parma and about what a church can be from interacting with all of you under, as many, I won't say this with the lay people, but as many of you know, difficult circumstances, you know, difficult circumstances. And this eparchy was just an inspiration to me.
I love how you speak and write stories that give us lessons about not just how we priests should serve as priests, but also how we as Christians can live in the church. And I'm wondering, are there lessons from your time in what's kind of the West and maybe more or less mission territory that are applicable for those of us who are in parishes in more long-standing places, like I was in Hazelton for so long, where they just presumed that, of course, all of their churches would stand for all of eternity, and they're facing a different reality. Are there lessons that either we as priests you would like to share with us from your experience, or that you think we should take back to our people that we serve?
Yeah, of course, we're all facing similar problems. I think one of the things I've learned is the importance of telling your people the truth. Sometimes you have a parish where the priest says, you should close this parish, bishop, it's run out of money. And they had a lot of money. And this very sincere priest, I'm not talking about losers who don't show up on Sunday or something like that or don't do their job, but we were trained, as I told my guys, we were trained in seminary to maintain an ethnic parish with fundraisers. That's what we were trained to do. That's a particular skill set, And but as you all know, that's a suicide pact nowadays. You're presiding over a soon-to-be dead parish if that's how you see things. But, anyway, so one of these examples I'm thinking of, the priest spent all this money over the years, from millions of dollars. When the money runs out and the people are throwing in $300 a week or $100 a week, it's like, well, you can't keep the place open, Bishop. But, in some cases, we have a big parish meeting, and the people say, we didn't know any of this. We had no idea what the expenses were. And at least one of my parishes is coming back to life because one of my priests who's a good organizer went in and said, you all have to have a plan to fix this. And the lay people came up with a plan to get the parish back on its feet. And so I'm planning to, I'm sending in one of our more vibrant young priests now to be the pastor there. But the problem is that we don't tell them the truth. So how can they pitch in if they don't know what's happening? One story, though, from my early career was there was a letter to the editor in the local Latin Rite paper, and they were often kind of silly. One of my priest friends claimed the editors wrote them to fill up the space. But anyway, this guy wrote this letter, and he said, none of our priests love their people. You know how I know that, he said? Because they don't teach tithing. If they cared about us, they would teach tithing. And I read this letter and thought, what a crackpot, And then probably because it made me angry, I kept thinking about it. And then I kept thinking, you know what? I believe in tithing. My mother taught me to tithe, and I have tithed my whole life. And my mother taught me, if you tithe, God will take care of your finances for you. And I thought, if I don't, that guy was right. I was trained by lay Catholics not to teach them about tithing. I know all kinds of, they always spread these stories. The only thing the priest ever talks about is money. Well, that's not true. I never talked about money. And I sat in the pews most of my life and I didn't hear about money either. So it just wasn't, it's not true. But anyway, so I came up with a series of 3 sermons on tithing. First, I explained the Old Testament. Then I told them some, actually, I don't remember what the 3-part plan is now, but one of them was stories of people who tithe that I know of in my own life. And anyway, so in every parish where I do that, some people will start tithing as a result of those sermons. But it was kind of an example, I think, of how we're afraid to tell them the truth a lot of times. And when we tell them the truth, they respond. That's, after all, what they're really there for, isn't it? Did that answer your question, Father? Okay.
So I want to ask, with your background in so many different parishes, so many parts of the U.S. and in Rome, can you speak a bit to what changes and what stays the same between different cultures you're ministering in?
What changes and what stays the same? No matter where you are, You know, you're looking at people who are made in the image and likeness of God, who have an immortal soul. We're only here for a short time. And so that's the same everywhere. St. Peter says the devil is roaming the world like a lion, trying to eat souls. That's the same everywhere, rich or poor, educated, uneducated. And everybody knows that too. They all know we're only here for a short time, and at some point we're going to face the conclusion of our life and how we spent it. And so, Jesus died for those people. One of my favorite convicting passages is when St. Paul says, "Who are you to judge somebody else's servant?" And then when he talks about scandal, he says, "You may give scandal to your brother for whom Christ died." Think of that. Somebody who irritated you, that you don't even know, but Jesus died for him or her. So that's the same everywhere. And that's this awesome responsibility that God has given to you to tell people that and to escort them through this confusing life for what they were made for. To live with God forever. As St. Paul says, to in the fullness of his glory. Hey, Father.
Could you please share how did you recognize that God is calling you for priesthood?
How did I recognize that God was calling me to the priesthood? That was very easy. This Ruthenian priest visiting Salt Lake said, "You should go to our seminary." And I said, "No, I shouldn't. I'm not Ruthenian." And after 9 months, he talked me into meeting Bishop Thomas Dolanai. And Dolanai, he was a smart man. He checked me out a little bit, you know. And then he said, "Kurt, I want you to be one of my priests." And I thought, well, if you can't take a call like that from a successor to the apostles, then you really don't have any faith at all, do you? And if you want to go to retreats and stare at candles and things like that, and you can't figure it out when a successor to the apostles says that to you. So I will tell you this. I think my roller coaster through seminary, I'm sure others have had a worse one, but mine's as bad as anyone I ever knew of. But I did know the whole time Bishop Thomas wanted me, so I stayed in. When he said that to me, he didn't know he was calling the next bishop of Passaic at the time.
Quick question, Bishop. When we went a very long time in the Albuquerque Phoenix without a bishop, as you know very well, and so when
You talking about recently?
yeah, recently,
You had a bishop.
well,
Why do you guys keep saying that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
when Bishop Hartford came in, it was, I guess we had our own solo bishop, you could say. When he came in, he called in about each of us to have a one-on-one with him, which was great. And I think I was the first one to have a one-on-one with the new bishop, and I just kind of vented for probably an hour over lunch about all the things that I needed him for, or I would like to see in a bishop. And then the Holy Spirit struck me, and I asked finally at the end, what would you like to see from me, from your clergy? You're a brand new bishop, you're new at this. I'm sure it's very intimidating. What would you like to see from me? And he was very quick to answer, and it was wonderful. And is there anything that as a bishop that the priest can expect a lot from you, demand a lot from you? Is there anything that you appreciate from your presbyter in general, or individual pastors or priests that help you, who have been so obedient to the call of the Holy Spirit, to do your job better or in a more fulfilling way?
There are a lot of specific things I could say, but in general, when I started in Passaic, I met all the priests and I talked to them about prayer and the Psalms. And I don't even remember this, but somebody told me, I told them, your job in life is to die a saint. And I think with every priest, if his relationship with God is good, everything else will come out of that. Not to turn this into too long of an answer, but at University of Utah, we had this evaluation form that was extremely short at the end of every course. And when I inquired about it, the chairman explained they did a lot of research and they found that all kinds of different people are good teachers or bad teachers, but there's hardly anything in common. And so they just came up with this questionnaire where 4 of the questions were filler, and the 4th question was he a good teacher or not? And so, you know, all kinds of different people can be great pastors, but everybody can be a saint. And if your spiritual life with God is good, you're going to be a great pastor, no matter what your talents, your personality, who your people are. So I think that's the one thing I would ask of any priest is say your prayers and be a saint.
What do we think, Bishop Kurtz and Father Cyril, for this wonderful conversation?